Welcome to Releasing Your Inner Dragon, where story creators talk story creation. Drake is an award-winning fantasy novelist and creative writing teacher. You can find his epic fantasy series, The Genesis Oblivion, on Kindle Vella. Marie runs a fantasy world-building channel called Just in Time Worlds, and her first book, The Hidden Blade, is available on Kindle Unlimited. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome back to Releasing Your Inner Dragon. We are back.
After our cancer hiatus, my cancer vacation. It really wasn't fun. I wouldn't recommend it. The brochure looked really good. Once I got there, I mean, the service sucked. The extracurriculum things that we did, laying on a table and getting radiated, laying in a chair and getting filled with poison. It wasn't as fun as I thought it was going to be. I thought, it sounded really exciting in the brochure, but yeah, just if you can just avoid that, vacation resort, I would highly recommend it.
Oh man, would not recommend.
Worst experience of my life, but everything's looking good. I'm feeling good. So we're back. We'll start recording again. We'll keep doing this. I actually got 2 other shows that I'm dropping. We've already started recording one as well. I'll be pimping those when we start dropping them. One is a show where basically I'm taking one of my private consultants. It's not exactly that way because it's a little bit scripted, even though you won't feel it, because there has to be specific topics. We're writing a novella, and he is a fledgling writer. He doesn't have a huge amount of experience, so that there's a lot of mistakes. But we're writing a novella through we're thinking about 16 to 20 weeks, and so each episode is kind of the whole process of what it means to be a writer, then on to story creation and plotting, and then on to actual writing and mistakes that we make and everything like that. And you'll be able to see, at the end of the time, we'll have that story posted so you can read it and kind of see where everything went as we went through. So hopefully it'll be very educational. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I am bringing back Drake's Brutal Breakdown. I used to write them. Not a lot of people read them because they were like 7,000 words long, where I would review a movie, but not just from a fan perspective, but from the code and what worked and what didn't. A lot of things that we're doing on here, I'm going to do it as a video.
So speaking of educational content, today we are going to talk about promises. So this is another writer's journey podcast where we're going to talk about what happens when you fail to deliver on promises to your readers. And this is not just in-game promises, which we spoke about when we did signposting. This is also promises around your tone and around the character types, the genre types, even the blurb on the back of your book.
Yeah, even the marketing. And we've all experienced that. I mean, like, one of the things that really pisses me off, a lot of comedies that have been coming out over the last 20 years or so are not very fun. You'll watch the trailer and you will laugh the entire trailer. You're like, oh my God, this movie is going to be so amazing. And then you go watch the movie and you realize that the only funny parts were in the trailer. And like, there's nothing else funny. Yeah. And so that's really weird to do. And I think that bleeds into this, where the marketing was one thing and then the show just isn't.
I'll start off by why we got onto this topic is because I was watching a Brandon Sanderson video where he spoke about how he had done kind of internal signposting wrong. So his readers were under the impression that the characters were on the wrong path, and they kept expecting the characters to be turned back to the right path of the plot. But the characters were on the correct path. But because the readers and the characters didn't know that, and the readers thought the characters were getting distracted, the readers thought that they were going in the wrong direction.
Being lied
to. And the reader's time was being wasted because they'd have to turn back. And he said the thing that he realized was, it wasn't that anything was wrong with his plot. It was that what was wrong was his signpost, because he had never put in a signpost indicating that the characters believed the wrong thing, and that by going on what looked like a detour, they were actually on their way to the correct end destination. And that got me thinking about bad signposting in that way. Like,
that's the antithesis, where you don't put those breadcrumbs down.
Yes. And you don't put the breadcrumbs down, and then the twist happens, and your reader's left going, where did this come from? Why did this happen?
It's one of the things that made Sixth Sense so palatable and so amazing. You get to the twist, and it's a 20-year-old movie. So if I'm ruining this, like, you've had plenty of time to watch it. You know, when you get to the end and you realize Bruce Willis has been dead the whole movie, he's never been alive. You don't feel cheated because you easily think back of, oh my goodness. You know, even if you miss the fact that that the color red was a big, portent for the whole thing, never did anyone interact with Bruce Willis' character except for the boy, ever. Yeah. No one. And it's always just this weird. And so when you start really thinking back, you don't feel, even though no one caught it. You know, I've met people like, oh, I figured it out. How? Like, no, you didn't. Like, no one figured that out. It was brilliant. It was literally one of the best, examples of that's ever been accomplished. You have those breadcrumbs, they're there, and so you feel satisfied at the end. Whereas if they weren't there, if you literally had no clue, if you have no chance of figuring out, even if you don't figure it out, if you have no chance of figuring it out, then you feel cheated.
Yes, you do.
So you have to give those things. Yes. But what we're talking about is where you promise one thing. It really is kind of the plot version of a Chekhov's gun.
Yes.
Chapter 1, we walk in the room. I say, hey, readers, there is a loaded gun sitting on the table. Look at it. It's cocked. It's loaded. It's ready to go. And if I spend that much time talking about it, the readers will be like, oh, okay, I got to remember the gun because that gun's coming back into play. That gun is absolutely being used. And then you never use it. It's never ever mentioned again. And you're like, what the heck? Like, why wasn't? And so that's plot devices. So what we're talking about is actual plotting, where you actually promise one thing. And this becomes a really hard balancing act. When we were talking earlier, because we want our twists, but there's other aspects to it too. You know, one of the things a lot of, my stories, other people's stories start off with is you introduce the character. They have to have a goal. They have to have something that they're trying to work for. It's almost never the actual goal of this story that we're about to tell. So a lot of times those goals never get met. They get overshadowed, because the goal is enough to keep us interested, because that's what we need. You have to care about the character. You have to care about the goal. They have to be doing something. You have to be active. And so it's a small goal, but we're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let me follow this and figure this out. And then this big thing comes along and pulls them off of that and blows their world up, and they enter that strange new world. And a lot of times you never even come back because it becomes so trivial and so worthless compared to this other massive life-changing thing that you're willing to let that go. It's still a balancing act. If it was too big, then it would hinge, on your mind and kind of weigh it down and be like that. So this is what we're talking about. And there's a lot to it. Do we want to start with maybe marketing?
Yeah, let's start with marketing.
Start from the outside and work in.
Yeah, let's start with marketing, because there are books, and this is more, I suppose, YA than epic mostly. But there are books that promise a thing. Like, there are books that promise a kick-ass assassin, and then there are no bodies hitting the floor. That makes the character not an assassin. There are vampire books where the vampires sparkle, and that to me is not a vampire.
Yeah, but the grievance that really bugs me is, which is what's rife on Amazon right now for the indie publishers. They will classify their book in a genre that it isn't.
Yes,
it'll be a vampire erotica, and because vampire erotica is so oversaturated, they'll put it as comic book hero because there's only like 50 books in that category. And so, and that's actually accurate. I got a friend who writes superhero. That's comic book superhero is what it is. He writes a series in that. And for probably 2 years, the top 10 books were vampire erotica.
Yeah.
In the comic book superhero genre. Those things piss me off.
I had a Kindle Unlimited subscription at one point, and I downloaded a book on it because there was a dragon on the cover, and the blurb was, dragons have taken over Chicago, and, will the humans survive, and so on. And it was labeled as a urban fantasy, okay, which I enjoy my urban fantasy. It was a dragon shapeshifter erotica. The level of the unfulfilled promise to me, because I've got nothing against erotic literature, but that was not why I opened this book.
Right.
I opened this book to read about dragons taking over Chicago, not to read about a girl and a dragon shapeshifter and things I really don't particularly want to imagine, like the size of a dragon schlong and what it could do to a human body. And yes, marketing. The genre you put your books in, yes, it's marketing, but it can't be completely inaccurate.
Well, and that's the problem. In the indie realm, there are no gatekeepers.
Yeah.
So if the author only cares about making a sale and it doesn't matter to them what evil, devious trick that they use to do it, then they're going to do it. They don't care. That's usually, to me, not always, usually to me, a really good indication that the writing sucks, the plotting sucks, the story sucks, and everything about it sucks. And they don't care. They're literally just want you to buy it, and they don't care if you ever read it. And because they'll just change they just have 30 author names. Amazon's actually finally starting to crack down on this, where they're banning indie authors that are, have these hundreds of author names. There's a difference in, so I'm getting ready to drop a book in the next week or so, Snurst, So Magic Much Fairy Tale. It's all done. It's all typeset. Everything is ready to go. And when I wrote it originally, when I wrote the screenplay 5 years ago, whenever I wrote it, I actually decided, because it was a kid's animated movie, I was never going to publish it. It was never going to be a book. It was never going to be anything about that. I decided to publish it under the name D.M. Alexander. It still has the M.A.D. initials, but it would separate it from the fact that I write epic, dark, gory fantasy.
Yeah.
So, that's what the Drake brand is. That's what I've kind of made a living off of. Now that I'm publishing it, I have decided to still do it under the Maxwell Alexander Drake brand because it's just a book. I did sell it twice. It was almost greenlit. It was literally days from being greenlit, and then COVID killed it. And it was the same thing with Fiend Folly. I mean, Fiend Folly is a dick and fart joke cartoon that I'm producing, and writing and all that. So I did think about coming up with another name for it, but then I was like, you know what? No, not all of my fans are going to follow me down that path. And my business manager was like, well, what if there's someone who's a huge fan of your epic fantasy, and they see your dick and fart joke show and it offends them, and then they're like, and I don't want to watch it, or I won't read any of his stuff anymore. I won't buy his real stuff that I'd love. And I was like, okay, so let's say that happens. If I sell Fiend Folly as a TV show to, Hulu whoever, or Netflix, whatever, I'm going to gain so many fans that the few that I lose are going to be a drop in the bucket. So be it. It still is a great marketing thing. So I didn't. I ended up, now I'm just doing everything under, all that. I'm working for a new video game, but that's just a few. They're cool with, oh, I'm writing Western under this name, and I'm writing romance under this name, and I'm writing whatever under that name. When you have 50, 75, 100, there's not that many genres. You're not writing in that many genres. So Amazon is finally starting to get wise to the fact that you're just doing that because you're using really horrible marketing techniques to just, grift readers into buying this thing.
I must also say it is not just the indie publishers, because I watched an interview with Glenn Cook of the Black Company series, and he was discussing book covers. And he said the biggest realization for him, the biggest eye-opener for him, is that book covers have got nothing to do with the contents of the book. They exist exclusively to sell the book. And he says, and if you are lucky as a traditionally published author, you will find a marketing manager who will allow you Vaseline before he bends you over the desk.
Yep.
Because you have no say in your cover.
Right. So when I first got into this industry, and I was on tour and stuff like that, I would meet a lot of people because indie publishing wasn't even indie publishing back then. It was just self-publishing. And it really, it's why I never went into it, because there was, especially 10, 15 years ago, there was no way to make money in it. Now it's a legitimate thing. And I'm getting more and more into the indie publishing because I have the fan base and all of that. But yeah, I used to tell people, and this is a little off the subject, but since we're on marketing, that I think it's pertinent. A lot of people go, "Oh no, I'm not even going to submit to the publishing industry," and my reason is because they won't let me do my cover, and that's just an insult to me. And I'm just going to do the cover, and so I'm going to self-publish it because I'm going to do the cover. And I would always say, all right, let's imagine that you have invented a widget. It's going to revolutionize the world. It's an amazing widget, and so there's only two companies that market widgets. There's one company that loves you and loves your product and loves everything about what you've done and literally thinks you're the cat's meow, but they've actually never sold a widget before, ever. And there's another widget company that doesn't give a crap about you because they sell hundreds of thousands of widgets from hundreds of thousands of different sources, but they're in every widget selling, retailer across the world. Which marketing company do you pick up? And everybody says, well, I'm going to pick the one with all the experience. I'm like, yeah. Have you ever sold a book worldwide? Have you ever made a cover that would market and actually sell the book? Have you ever written a back blurb to a book to actually, draw those people in and sell them on it? So you are right. Even the big publishers, the covers, the back blurb, they have a marketing spin to them. But I will challenge you that none of them just blatantly lie. Like, they don't throw a dragon on the cover when there's no dragons in the story, stuff like that. So they will put a marketing spin on it because you have one or two lines to encapsulate a 140,000 word novel and make it exciting. And so when you distill it down that much, you're going to have to cut corners and cheat a little bit.
So I don't have a problem with that. And as I say, like, you can absolutely exaggerate on your cover, but don't lie. Don't put a dragon on if there's not a dragon in the story.
Although it's not the 1970s, so don't exaggerate on woman parts.
Don't do
that.
Don't do that. Also, don't put women lying on a car.
Especially if it's epic fantasy.
Don't do a woman lounging on a horse.
Especially if it's a sci-fi opera.
Babes sell cars. It used to be a mantra of the 70s.
Yeah. And we're thankfully mostly past that. There are still the occasional whatever.
So marketing wise, don't lie. You can bend the truth. You can slide around it. Like that dragon book. You could put urban fantasy there if you also put erotica somewhere. Because then it's fun. Then I understand it's an urban fantasy, but it's also erotica, and that's what I'm letting myself in for. Fine. But don't hide it.
Right. So, I play a few app games on my phone, and we all do it now. It's, you can't, we're a society that can't sit for 3 minutes and just sit there. And one of the things that really bugs me is there's games that I have played before, and then you look at the ad, and it's literally not the game.
It's not at all the game.
What that makes me do is think to myself, if this company, because these are companies, these aren't some just indie author that's doing whatever. If this company is willing to totally lie about that, why would I, have the chance of giving them my credit card number or any of that stuff? Because if they're willing to just be this blatantly dishonest, they're willing to do anything. And like, that's a company I don't want to deal with. And so you got to kind of think that through, that balance. I mean, if you're a grifter who literally is a snake oil salesman and doesn't care, and all you care about is making the sale, and you're going to give them, a piece of crap thing that you maybe even plagiarized. I've had stuff plagiarized before that then I had to go after. I mean, the biggest one was when I was with Sony. Somebody plagiarized one of my Sony stories, and I was like, "Hey, Sony, sick." and then it was gone like that. If you're that person, then these words don't mean anything to you. But if you're actually out there trying to do the right thing, you got to understand, if you want retention, like, maybe I would have liked your dragon erotica because, sometimes we're just in the mood to read a dragon erotica.
Sure.
Some of us. And so if you had been honest to me I might have stuck with you, even though
I was more in the mood for urban fantasy. But I'm
right.
like, okay, but it's urban fantasy with an erotic flavor, and that's okay. Like I can go for that.
Right.
But because I was not expecting erotic fantasy at all.
So especially in this indie world, and I know a lot of our listeners are delving into that world or whatever, or maybe they already are. You do have to be accountable to yourself. Yeah, there's no gatekeeper. There's no one telling you what to do, but don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
Like try to, because you're going to retain more customers. That's the thing. I do want to end this subject on a positive note. So there's one movie that they advertised that was literally brilliant, and it's never been matched before. And that's where it's this very abstract commercial that you have no idea what's going on, and then it comes in, and there's this deep, beautiful voice that says, "No one can tell you what the Matrix is. You have to experience it for yourself." And you're like, I'm watching that movie. You have no idea what to expect. And it was perfect. Really the movie that you were hoping it would be. So like that's this, and they gave you nothing. And this is before really the internet. So you're not watching, sneak peeks and spoilers, and social media didn't exist. And nobody was like, oh my God, I saw, advanced screening and here's the spoilers of everything. So all of us went into that movie blind.
And it was amazing.
It was amazing. It was literally just off the charts. Now,
don't watch anything after that. But the
first make anything after that, did they?
No, nothing.
One, right?
They just made one.
Yeah. It's like Highlander. They made that one good movie, and it was awesome. And I'm thankful that they never made any other Highlander movie after that, because there can be only one.
There can be only one.
The other side of that, the marketing for Tomorrowland, you didn't know what the movie was about, but there was nothing that hooked you. So it was one of the biggest losing movies of the time, because the trailer went like, it's on YouTube. Go watch the trailer. And even if you've seen the movie, try to ignore the fact that you've seen the movie, because if you watch the trailer again, you just come out of the trailer going,
what?
I'm not going to see that. Like, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
And so it was like 10 years before I saw the movie, and it's actually a good movie.
Yeah.
But they did such a terrible job marketing it. And because they were trying to be clever, they were trying to be too clever. No one went and saw it. It lost so much money. It wasn't even funny. I want to say it cost, $280-300 million to make. And it made like $50 million or something ridiculous like that.
You have to do the basics. Like, people need to want to explore more. Don't be overly clever. Get it right first.
Yeah. It's got to be marketing.
Yeah.
It's got to be catchy. You can take some liberties, but it has to, we're talking about promises. You're promising something. The reason why genres exist, like, I don't read urban fantasy erotica ever. That's just not my thing. I don't do it, and it's fine. It doesn't mean that the genre is bad or it should be, canceled or whatever, just because I don't like it. It should exist. But I do read urban fantasy. So if I went into that and it was erotica, I'd be like, I am furious that I spent money on this.
I don't read romance. Absolutely, the romance genre is a massive genre, right? So there's lots of people who read it. I just personally don't read it. Right. So if I read a book that is 90% romance with 2% fantasy, I don't like it. Warn me that this is a fantasy romance.
It's only going to enhance your career, because you're going to pick up fans that actually want to read your stuff. If you are more truthful, if you are more understanding that you're looking for the right audience, because that's where you're going to get your bad reviews. You're going to get your bad reviews from people who don't like your stuff. These are marketing promises. Just to kind of tie this up. Why do we have different genres? Because different readers really like my wife is a huge mystery and thriller, not thriller, really, just murder mystery. That's her big thing. She reads so much murder mystery, it's not even funny. I don't read any murder mystery. It's not my thing. Yeah. So the reason why we have these, and the reason why marketing should be truthful to what it's doing, is because you're trying to find the right audience. And when you do, it's magical, because especially if you give them what they're looking for, they will tell their friends that they know enjoy this, or they'll do good reviews on it. Whereas you'll get your bad reviews when you are misrepresenting the truth, and they're like, well, I thought I was coming to this, it wasn't, and now I'm mad. It's sort of like I love milk and I love, Coke. I don't drink Coke anymore, but back in the day.
Yeah.
And if you've ever done this where you're like, I'm going to take a drink of my Coke because it's 100% Coke, and you take it and it's milk, it is horrible.
Yeah.
Even though I love milk. But at that point,
Yeah.
I would give that milk a really horrible review.
Because you were expecting Coke.
Because I was expecting Coke. My brain was locked in on Coke. And I, for whatever reason, I forgot that I had filled the glass of milk. It's the same thing. You have to think about this stuff. And yes, we want to get those new readers too, but you don't want to, gaslight people.
No.
You want them to come to you honestly, because you're in the genre that they're looking for. And every genre, I mean, hell, even dino porn is fairly, there are tens of thousands of people who read it, which shocks me, but
it is.
There's enough to make a good living off of. And since there's not a lot of competition in the market, everyone who writes dino porn gets read. So by the tens of thousands of people who want to read dino porn, and probably the person who wants to read that dragon porn.
Yeah, probably them too.
It's probably the same people that like dino porn. So you should be marketing to them.
So that's starting outside your book and working in. Now let's talk about the tone of your book. If you start out with a serious tone and you then devolve into comedy, there are some readers that you're going to lose. By the same token, if you start comedic and then suddenly at the end you're telling an epic story, well, actually that one might work, depending on how you do the character growth.
I don't think it would work if you change the tone. If you start off with a lighter story in a serious world, and then it just gets more and more and more serious, I think that's still the same tone. It's still the same feel from the beginning. But one of the things, and this the reason why we're talking about this, I've got a couple examples. So I just watched The King's Man, and that should be my favorite franchise of all time. So if you saw the original Kingsman, 90% of that movie is just this little bit more over the top James Bond movie, which I'm a huge James Bond fan. So absolutely 100%, I loved every second of it. And you're watching, I'm like, this is going to be, because James Bond has been less than it should be in recent years. Daniel Craig revived it. They really went off the rails, which was a shame, because Timothy Dalton was awesome. And Pierce Brosnan was one of my favorite human beings. So the fact that I didn't like them as James Bond was sad. So they got it back with the Daniel Craig, but watching Kingsman, I was like, yes, this is my new franchise. This is going to be amazing. And in the last 10 minutes, they did an Austin Powers movie, like all out, all stupid, all unrealistic, not over the top realism, cartoon. Like literally, if you've seen the movie, the people that get their heads blown off at the end, they actually shoot fireworks up. Actual fireworks, and it's into music, and it's a fireworks show, and it's just so stupid. And then the second movie, because I don't remember what it was called, just was that tone the whole way through. But now I've got a bad taste in my mouth, because you promised me this awesome, little bit more, action James Bond, and now you've gone to Austin Powers, and I love Austin Powers, but I hate your movie. It also had horrible writing, no plot, the dumbest villain ever, the most ludicrous, turns that were just stupid. So it was also a horrible movie, but I'm not going to follow you on your tone, because you screwed it up. So I didn't see The King's Man when it came out back in 2018, but it's on HBO for free. And so we were looking for something a couple nights ago to watch, and I was like, hey, it's going to be awful. I literally said those words. It's going to be awful. Let's watch it. And so we watched it. It was awesome. I loved it. And they've already been greenlit for another one. I think I got to do some research on it. I haven't yet, because I am going to do, it's probably going to be my first Drake's Brutal Breakdown. I think I'm going to do those 3 movies. I'm kind of excited to delve into that a little bit deeper and see where they're going. And now I'm excited that there's another one of those movies coming out, because again, it should be my favorite franchise. So there's that tone. And then what you were alluding to there, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. I'm a big Critical Role fan. I play D&D. I like Critical Role. I love what they're doing over there. I was excited that they got their own cartoon. It's a Legend of Vox Machina, or Machina, however you want to say it. I hate it. It's terrible. And the reason why it's terrible they've got some writing problems, and maybe I'll do a Drake's Brutal breakdown on the code that they're breaking, which is why they're not as strong as they could be. But it starts off very serious, and then they do Beavis and Butthead level humor, and I just don't feel that Beavis and Butthead level humor fits with serious D&D. And I kind of get what they're doing. If you've ever played D&D, when you're at the table as a group of players, you're goofing off constantly and you're saying the dumbest stuff and you're shooting off jokes. But those aren't in the world. That's just you doing these stupid jokes. But in the world, your characters aren't actually doing those. And I have seen where a DM is like, oh no, anything you say will happen. And I think that actually hurts the playability, because then you'll say something stupid and your character will end up getting screwed for it. And so then you'll self-censor yourself. And that's what the DM wants. They want a serious game, but D&D should be fun. It shouldn't be, serious all the time. They're trying to do a show that combines the player and the character world in one thing. But to me, and again, I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but to me, it failed. There's this one episode where they're actually doing this very serious thing. And they're actually, it deals with some pretty serious thematic elements in the episode, but they're also playing a game of dick punch during it. So like there's this the one moment where they're literally talking in front of the king and everything's very serious. And one of the guys takes that opportunity to punch the other one in the nuts. And they're like, and like, it literally wouldn't happen. Like you're in this very serious moment of life. You're not going to do something like that. And so those are two tones that are very, very different. And in my opinion, just don't mix it. It's like mixing Coke and milk. I don't think that'd be a good drink. I like Coke. I like milk. I don't think they work well together. Obviously these guys do. And there's a ton of fans. Again, it's subjective. So I'm not saying the show should be canceled. I'm just saying it's not for me. And the reason why it's not for me is because they promised me one tone and yet they're mixing in another tone.
That is the reason why I didn't like the Book of Boba Fett. So Boba Fett is a TV series which you follow Boba Fett in the Star Wars world. And I was all set to enjoy it because the promise made to me was that we are going to watch Boba Fett be a crime lord. We are going to watch him take the place of Jabba the Hutt on Tatooine, and he is going to be taking his strong pimp hand and, dealing it out. Like that's what we're going to see. So we got some of that. And the episodes where Boba Fett was being the crime lord, I enjoyed, or the half episodes. But the majority of the show, and I'm sorry if I'm spoiling this for you and you haven't seen it yet, but the majority of Boba Fett's show is flashbacks to the most boring ass backstory of how he got spat out of the Sarlacc pit and then, how he got rescued from that. And like, there's all kinds of backstory bits, but I don't care. This is not about him becoming a hero. He is already a kick-ass character. It is about him being a crime lord. That is what I want to see.
And that's what the trailers kind of promised.
And it was episode upon episode of flashback. Not one episode at the beginning. Every episode had a flashback. I can't even. Don't promise me I'm going to see a crime lord and then show me some crime lordness. And when you're marketing it, it's all crime lord. And when, he's there at the end of the Mandalorian's episode where it got introduced that we're going to get a Book of Boba Fett, don't show me all the crime lord bits and then flash back to Boba Fett and the Tusken Raiders, which is what that show should have been called.
I haven't seen it. And I don't really have any interest.
Yeah,
I've been kind of disillusioned with Star Wars.
Watch Superman and Lois instead, since you're on HBO.
So I actually started that when it was on, I think the CW or whatever, because it was running on Hulu.
The great thing about Superman and Lois is that they fulfill a bunch of tonal promises. One, it's going to be Superman. It is going to be uplifting. It is going to be the good guy wins, because that is what Superman is. You cannot make Superman movies and make a dark movie. Tonally, it doesn't work. That's what you got a Batman for, not Superman.
Which is why I'm a much bigger Batman fan than Superman.
Yeah, 100%. But, so tonally they fulfill that promise. But then instead of going into like a freak of the week kind of show or something like that,
which is what they did for the first 2 seasons of
Smallville. Yeah. Instead of doing that,
by the third season, it got good.
What they did with Superman and Lois was they were like, what if he was a parent? And the focus isn't, yes, there's a villain, and there's a villain Superman has to defeat and all the rest of that, but he has a family that has conflict. He has
a lot of conflict.
Boys, he's got his wife Lois, they've got to bring up the boys. He's got his responsibilities to the world versus his responsibilities as a father.
Yeah.
And that's just so and that was what they promised you in the tone of the first episode, and it pulls through the entire series, and they do it well.
Yeah, like I said, I think I watched maybe 4 or 5 episodes of season 1 before I got derailed. I was enjoying it. And you're right. Like the number one thing that I was enjoying, because I'm not a Superman fan, because he's gorgeous and invulnerable and perfect, and I'm none of those things. I don't relate to him, but I am a father of 2 boys, and because it was also the thing that I loved was children are dicks. Like if you're a parent, you will know, like we love them and they're, whatever, but they hate you. Like, I don't understand how our human race continues, because you basically birth something that comes from you that you are 100% responsible for every aspect of feeding them and clothing them and protecting them. And they spend at least, 14, 15 years, some of them 20, 30 years, hating your guts. And so it's this weird relationship thing. And it doesn't, it has its ups and downs, so you have these years that you're everything, and then you have these years that you're nothing, and all of that. And so I love that there's that, like the 2 boys in the show are individuals. They have, that's what you really learn as a parent. You think when you first decide to have children, you think how awesome it's going to be, all the knowledge and wisdom that I have. I'm going to make sure that, I'm giving them this and I'm doing this. And you have they are an individual person from the time they pop out of the womb, and they don't give a crap about anything else, but just like you and just like everyone else on this planet, like they're not there to be a little mind clone. They are 100% their own human being. Now my boys are 18 and 20, getting ready to be 21 in a few months. They're men. I've been shifting to a much different role, but even when they were teenagers. But that's the thing I loved about that show. They were not your perfect little boys that, did whatever. And it's like, we're Superman's child, and so we have to do this. They are like, that's the dynamic of the show that really drew me to it. I really like that.
Those boys were definitely teenage boys with all of the teenage boyness.
Yeah, and constantly doing things that Dad would not approve of.
Dumb things.
But yeah, so that's a great tone. It was a great, and not only that, it was very realistic. Not only did you promise me that this is a different, because we've done Superman to death. So what's a different way to play with Superman? Because you can't affect Superman. No. He's invulnerable and he's, everything.
And you mustn't try, because if you do, then you're not giving me Superman. You're lying to me. I expect him to have freaking laser vision, cold breath, laser eyes, flight,
take a bullet to the eyeball and just stare at you while it bounces off. That was a great scene.
And if I don't get it, I'm pissed off.
Right. As been said in a lot of dark movies, if you're going, and I don't remember exactly what this was. It's just an image that popped in my head, but some villain said, if you're going to follow me on this, you can love nothing.
Yeah. Because
they will be your weakness.
Yeah.
And so I love that they went that route. You have a wife and child, 2 children. Yeah. And you also have other things that you love, not just the wife and child, children. And there's a huge amount of vulnerability when you have those things. When you love something, it's a vulnerability for you. It's worth, in my opinion, it's worth the vulnerability, because what you get out of it is tenfold the vulnerability.
Of course.
But yeah, that was a great tone and a great promise to me. and we're not even talking about genres. You can mix genres, and that's actually a lot of good stories do mix, the genre. Like if the dragon urban fantasy porn was well written, there's literally nothing wrong with it. It's an urban fantasy erotica. Yeah. And you're gonna get some erotica readers that'll be like, ooh, I like urban fantasy. And I like erotica. So, and then you're going to get some urban fantasy like, oh, I could dig on some erotica in my urban fantasy. And so you're going to get that because you've been honest. So it's sort of like Firefly. Firefly is a great example of that. Now that's marketing, but again, they marketed Firefly. So I remember seeing the trailers for Firefly, and I was like, never will I watch that. Everyone who tuned into it were people who were more interested in what I would classify as some of the really light, like the vampire stuff or the ghost stuff that's on CW. That was the people that tuned into Firefly, and they were like, this is not what I wanted. And so they panned it. It got canceled. Years later, I happened to watch it, and I'm like, this is amazing. This is everything that I would want in a TV show. How dare they cancel this? They just marketed to the wrong people. But let's move into plot devices. Things that you're promising, which is really where we started with this, with what you watched with Brandon Sanderson, where he realized that he hadn't given them enough information to know that this is moving the story forward. So why don't you, what are some of the things that kind of drive that for you?
I think that one of the most important things is you cannot twist out of nowhere. You cannot do a plot twist that the reader has no way of going back and picking out the clues for. Because if you do, the reader feels like they have been deliberately made a fool of, right? So as opposed to thinking that you're clever, they think that, oh, you're just trying to trick me.
The thing that upsets my wife with the murder mysteries is when, like, the murderer was the delivery guy that dropped off the Amazon package, has no lines. Literally, you only saw him on camera. They walked up, dropped the package, rang the doorbell, and walked away. And then a novel, later, they're like, oh yeah, remember the Amazon guy that was in it for 3 lines? He's the murderer. There's literally no way to connect that.
And the murder mystery example is actually a very good one, because the murder mystery, it's very important when you write such a thing that your reader can connect the dots enough so that when they come to the end and the murderer is revealed, they go, oh, that makes sense. How did I miss that?
Yep.
So it's a very fine line to walk when you're going to twist, when you're going for a twist or a big reveal, is because you have to give enough that people get there. But you don't want to give so much that people are like, oh, this is definitely going to happen, and I'm basically just plodding until I reach this point, because now you're too predictable.
So, and it is, that's literally what you're doing. You're trying to figure out, it's sort of like I still think my best example is The Sixth Sense. And it's just a great balancing act of there's when you rewatch the second time, you're like, oh my God, I just missed. Like, they laid it out for me and I was just blind to it. And I think they even did a really good job with Jumanji. Not the remake with Rock. Not that they were bad. I actually like those too.
I loved the remake, but I loved the remake for the ridiculousness of its tone.
Right.
There's a great example of a perfect tone, because I think it's the girl who gets turned into the Rock. To my dying day. That movie will stick with me for that man's performance in it. It was just fantastic.
But the Robin Williams one,
yes,
I think they did a really good job. I mean,
they did.
You go through it, you're in this thing, and they're going to die, and oh my goodness, how are they getting out of this? The reason why that movie is really memorable for me is because I was watching it with one of my best friends, and his crappy girlfriend was there. We hadn't seen it. She had, so she wasn't even really paying attention. And she's a horrible person anyway. And I really hated that he even dated her when he dated her. But this is the epitome of what she was. So we're into it. We haven't seen it. And we rented it on VHS from Blockbuster. You'll have to Google that stuff, kids. So we're watching it and we're into it. And it's all, great. And we're maybe 15 minutes from the end. And she goes, this is just a game. So when they finish it, all this goes away. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. Yes, I should have picked up on that, but I hate you.
Yes.
Like, because I didn't pick up on it. I was enthralled in the
Yeah.
movie, and they gave it, like, once she said it, I was like, yes, obviously should have realized that, but I'm in the story. I'm
Yes.
in the excitement, and oh my goodness, and all these twists and all these turns and all this danger, and oh, this is great. I would have really liked to have gotten the payoff 15 minutes from then when the movie gave me that, and I went, right.
Yes.
It is just a game. They won the game. All of this goes away, and none of this happened.
And that's one of the few cases of it is just a game that actually worked, because mostly that trope does not work and you shouldn't do it.
Right.
But they did it very well. With a plot device or with a plot twist, you've got to put in at least 2 or 3 clues. But you need to make sure that you're not, like, it's prophecy is a good example, or prophetic dreams. If you're going to use them in fantasy, which a lot of people do, I do, but you've used prophetic dreams, like, it happens.
Well, in a way, yes.
If you're going to use them, you've got to disguise it and tweak it. And it's got to mean not this, but that, referring to maybe this, maybe that. There's got to be, like, enough doubt that people aren't just, oh, this is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're just going to plot to the end. And you have to fulfill the promise. The Star Wars 7, 8, and 9 is a perfect example of unfulfilled promises, one movie after the other. Now, granted, it's because they changed writers, and the dude who did the middle Star Wars movie should never write anything in his entire life ever again. Please. They never fulfilled the promise there. They set up things and they never fulfilled it. Who is Rey? Who knows? Who cares? Because at this point, I've been promised and lied to so many times, I no longer care.
Like I said, I've been disenfranchised with Star Wars for a long time. Yeah. So just really not watching it anymore.
Yeah.
They've kind of lost me as a fan.
And it's because they just never fulfilled their promises again. But yeah, so if you're out there and you're writing things with twists and turns and making promises in your books, please fulfill them.
These are all things you should think about. These are all difficult things to think about. And you should put that time and effort. And if you're a plotter, you should be able to figure this stuff out before you start writing so that you kind of know where you're going. If you're a pantser, unfortunately, you have to write it and then find the holes and then rewrite and cut stuff and throw stuff away and rewrite. And that's the difference between discovery writers and plotters. Be smart. The hardest thing to get is a fan. It's incredible. And then it's just as hard to get the second fan, and just as hard to get the third fan, and just as hard to get the fourth fan. I want to keep them. It costs a lot of money and a lot of effort. I don't want to lose them for something stupid.
And on that note, I think we will close out today's podcast, and we will see you for another one.
Bye.
Hey guys, Drake here. Thank you so much for listening to Releasing Your Inner Dragon podcast. I hope you're getting a ton of information and maybe even some nuggets of gold that you can take into your own writing to help you on your journey of story creation. A couple things I want to throw at you. First of all, for the first time in years, I am opening myself up to being a private mentor again. If you would like for me to work with you to improve your writing right now, reach out to me. You can either go to my website, maxwellalexanderdrake.com, and send me a contact form, or just email me at author@maxadrake.com. Also, as many of you may know, I've been out of the novel game for quite a few years. I was the lead fiction writer for EverQuest Next from Sony. I've been in the movie and TV industry for a few years now, but I am excited to say I'm back into the novel game. I've actually been working on a novel for a little while now, and I'm going to start dropping it on Amazon's Vella. So if you're on that platform, look me up, Maxwell Alexander Drake. Thank you again for listening, and as always, keep writing.
Hi guys, this is Marie from Releasing Your Inner Dragon, and I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you're interested in more content on fantasy world building, head over to YouTube and look up Just in Time Worlds. I release tons of content there. If you'd like to check out my book, The Hidden Blade by Marie M. Mullaney, it is available as an ebook, audiobook, and print book on Amazon. Thanks for listening, and see you soon.